Everyone. Today's episode 35 with Bryan Peters, founder and president of Advanced Track based in Dallas, Texas. Awesome episode. He's 4 years into his business and talked about the different milestones he hit along the way. First, getting that SBA loan in 2021 and sort of that relief he felt. Second, hiring that first person, that awesome salesperson who's totally bought into the company and how important that was to growth. Then even this month, getting a physical property established in Texas and kind of the growth goals for the next few years. Bryan's journey is awesome as someone who has been successful and will continue to be successful, who's still living it every day and has been very methodical about how he's grown from zero to multi-million in revenue, bootstrapping the entire thing. So Bryan's a good friend, awesome guy, awesome episode. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, Bryan, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 35.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you. We've been friends now 4 years, met in Vegas for the initial ARA show, both starting our companies at the same time. I think percentage chance that both of us would still be in business back then, somewhere between 0 and 100%, but we're here. And
yeah, here we are.
It's cool to see you grow. You know, you've made a lot of changes along the way, but excited to have you on because I saw you when it was really just a concept and you were just getting started and you've had a lot of success the last few years. So excited for this episode in particular to talk about your journey from idea and concept and growing it to multi-million in revenue and bootstrapping it along the way while working full time. I think a lot of awesome lessons for rental companies who aspire to do a similar path. So excited to dive in. Just some quick housekeeping notes. So we got some exciting changes for the Rental Roundtable going to effect next year based on feedback we've gotten from our audience. So on the good news, we're going to be doing more frequent episodes. We've been doing about every 2 weeks for the last 18 months since we started this. We've done 35 episodes. Next year, we're planning to go weekly. As part of that, we're going to be, just to help with scheduling, doing these pre-recorded. So we won't be doing these live anymore on the Zoom webinar. We'll be doing these essentially not live and posting those on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. We've also launched a new rental roundtable website, therentalroundtable.com, if you want to check that out. We'll be doing blog posts as well and email summaries. At the end of the episode, we'll be summarizing these as well. So this is the last legacy episode, and so we move into 2025, making some changes. So just be on the lookout for that. We'll send an email out in the next week on some of those changes. All being said, I want to jump into Bryan's story. So Bryan, first of all, love the vest. You got the Advanced Track swag on. You also got the sweatshirt underneath that. Some of the best.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. I love the branding. And this is on video for Spotify and Apple Music too, so people will be able to see it.
Cool.
So yeah, Bryan, tell me about your story. You know, you families from the rental industry. You had this concept. Take me back to, getting this off the ground, getting this started.
Yeah. In 2020, I was kind of in a spot with my family's business where I just realized like I wanted to kind of go out and do my own thing. And I don't think it was anything negative as far as like what I was experiencing. It was more along the lines of like, I just wanted to do my own thing. I've always wanted to start a business from scratch. I wanted to be involved with the logo and the website and, like literally everything that goes into that. And there's probably a lot of different, probably less challenging paths that I could have chosen to start a business and kind of quench my thirst for that. But nonetheless, rental was something that was kind of in my blood. I loved equipment. My family started a business in 2000 and I was a high schooler at that point, and kind of that's when my desire to do something like this really started. And so I kind of knew that what I wanted to do. I just didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. And then 2020 dropped a COVID bomb right in the middle of our plans of what we were going to do. And so that kind of it introduced a little bit of a challenge, right? Number one, interest rates were low when we first started, but I was having a really difficult time trying to find a bank that was willing to say, hey, let's go ahead and, give this guy $1 million or $2 million to go buy some rental equipment. So kind of started the business with more of an independent dealer approach to it, thinking, okay, let's start out with doing consignments and buying and selling, just the stuff that we can purchase and kind of control ourselves. And then we'll do some consulting. And so I had a lot of experience around the construction industry and around equipment. And so kind of decided that I was going to go down that path. And we basically spent the first year of our business, trying to build up the coffers, build up a little bit of a history and a story to be able to go to banks to present that to. And so that's when we met, was kind of right on the heels of my first SBA loan that came through to start buying equipment.
Yeah. So I'm curious, even go back to 2000, you're in high school and you sort of had this vision of like, I want to start a company. I love equipment in particular. Like what about starting a company was so inspiring you? Because I imagine it's hard for you now. It's probably hard for your parents. It's not easy starting a company from scratch. A lot of easier things you can do in life. Like what is the motivation driving you to want to do something like this?
I think at the time I saw two different things. Number one, I saw an illusion of freedom. I say illusion because, my family, when they started that business, it was, hey, we could take vacations and we could do these things. And I saw a lot of quote unquote freedom, right? It's flexibility is what I would say more than anything, right? And that was something that I was like, this is really a cool output from having a small business. But more than that, I thought the idea of being able to hire people, employ people, and almost build out an extended family, if you will, was the biggest thing for me. It still is today. I mean, I have a relatively small family, and I view our employees as an extension of that family, right? So it's an opportunity for me to be able to take something that I'm passionate about and turn it into good for others too.
And I do think the vacations and all that does happen, but it's not first year, second year, 10, 15, 20, that'll
Yeah.
happen. But a lot of your purpose is driven from your community and how you can support others, create opportunities for people, create jobs, create a culture
Yeah.
for other people. That is the why, right? Because when you're up at 5 in the morning, staying up till 11 at night, doing QuickBooks things and whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's not really about yourself. It's not about that extra vacation. It's really about the purpose, which comes from probably what you saw with your family, right? And the jobs they were able to create for people.
Yeah, I thought it was so cool that we had this environment where people could come to work. They were pouring in, their skills. And then I also, was just really, I was really infatuated with the equipment, right? Especially what they did. Our business model is slightly different than others. We don't do any aerial equipment. We don't do any small equipment. We're strictly heavy earth moving equipment. And so that was something that I was also really passionate about was, hey, I like this equipment. I like to see it work. I like to help contractors. It's kind of a multitude of reasons. And it's familiar too, right? So I think when 2020 rolled around and I decided it was time to push that button, I was like, well, this is what I know. It's what I know. It's what I'm familiar with. And I feel like it's the tools I've been given, to be able to best be able to live that out.
Do you feel like if COVID didn't happen in 2020, you would have started the business at that point?
I had already planned to do it before COVID hit. So it wasn't like COVID hit and then I decided to do it. But honestly, I think it made the path to advanced track a little, while it kind of stretched some things out and gave us some opportunity to see a few things through. I think it made the path a little bit easier, in all honesty. And I say that because I think in 2020, I went through some personal stuff where I was like, I don't, I can chart my own path here, right? And I feel like I had that freedom, and to a degree, COVID was kind of the point in my life where I was like, okay, I'm gonna do what it makes the most sense to me, and what's gonna benefit me, my family, and those I care about, and roll. And so I think that kind of just sparked a little bit of it. It's not to say I don't know that I wouldn't have done it exactly the same if it wasn't there, but it definitely presented some challenges in year two of our business as we started to buy more equipment. The effect that COVID had on the supply chain and whatnot really affected our ability to be able to buy equipment. And so it did make it more challenging, but I feel like it's, to your point earlier about how we've kind of just bootstrapped this business, it's just forced us to find different ways, right? I mean, I have a custom search window on my computer, had one for a long time, where I would search Facebook ads from all over the country for cat equipment because there were people that were trying to sell equipment that, they were listing on a Facebook marketplace and not going through dealerships and so forth. That's how we were trying to find equipment. So it forced us to think outside the box. And I'm fortunate that we were forced to do that, because I think it presented some good opportunities for us when others were struggling too. So yeah, I'm a firm believer that as you go through life and business and relationships, like there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be challenges. And I think the best way to approach those, and I have to live this out and practice this, is not something that's just, I'm saying this and it's easy, but is to try to find the positive in every single opportunity, right? Like view that negative thing that happens to you as an opportunity and figure out what the opportunity for positive outcome is. And I think that's the way we kind of tackled the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think given if you're a realist of all the odds stacked against you starting a business from scratch without funding, all the things, right? Like you have to be an optimist to take that on because of what it's going to take, and you could do everything right, and you still may not make it, right? And
Yeah,
I
that's right.
like the idea of never waste the crisis, right? 2020 was a year I don't think anyone wants to go back and relive,
Right.
but like, I mean, for me too, I was at Uber, that business cratered. I'd always wanted to start a company. If COVID didn't happen, quickly wouldn't happen, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, right? So that also expedited online renting and some of those things at that time. So it sounds like that's already always been inside of you, and COVID maybe was the forcing function to go, okay, wait, what are we doing with our lives? You know, everything's sort of
Yep.
crashing right now. I have this passion for helping people. I have a passion for equipment. I know like back of my hand, you know, I've got the work ethic, you know, why not go do this, right? And you probably looked in the mirror and said, let's do it, right? So now we're in 2020, 2021, you're getting things off the ground. So you started with the dealership side, right? You weren't doing any rentals at that point. Like, you know, how did you decide to start with equipment sales, and then how did you start getting into rentals and re-rentals? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so when we started the business, it wasn't for a lack of like desire to be in the rental business. We knew we wanted to be in the rental business. The issue that we had was we could not find a bank to lend us any money. We were like literally brand new on paper. You know, even though I had a resume that indicated where I had worked and so on and so forth, it was like that every bank ran into a no, right? And honestly, it was like a year of hearing no before we finally got a maybe. And when we finally got that maybe, it just kind of re-energized us to focus on rentals. But because of that, I knew, I mean, obviously I was in a mode where I had to do something, right? Because the rental deal wasn't going to work out. You know, I had already started this business and it was time to kind of take it to the next point, right? And so we said, okay, well, we're gonna start off with some consulting, and then we're gonna buy and sell as opportunities arise. And we just took advantage of those opportunities as they came our way. And then I had in the summer of 21, I had a really good customer who reached out to me who said, hey, I really want to rent some iron. I don't want to use I don't want to go to a dealer and do an RPO. I'm really interested in just doing a rental, but it needs to be long term, right? I know I have this contract. It's going to be a long term deal. And so the wheels kind of started turning in my head. Like, I wonder if I could go get a loan for just one machine, right? I had been trying to get loans for packages and so forth. And so I called a couple of people, got introduced to someone through ARA, and he was like, hey, I think, what are you trying to do with your business? And so I explained to him, what our goals were. And he goes, I think we can actually do this. I think we could get you an SBA loan to get you, more of a package of equipment. And it all kind of went from there. Really started snowballing in the summer of 21, and then we were funded October of 21, and just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it was the ARA was able to essentially connect you with the right people to get the loan. I mean, tell me a little bit more about the loan process. Why did you decide to look at SBA loans? Did you ever look at, private investors, private equity? There's obviously a lot of ways to get cash. Like, why did you focus on the SBA side in particular? For people listening, like, you went through the zigzag process. If you want to streamline it, like, who at the ARA should people talk to? Like, what's the one thing someone should know if they're really trying to fund their business and they're, in that first year?
Yeah, I wish that I would have found ARA sooner. I knew about ARA. I guess I just didn't understand like all the breadth of their resources. And so kind of how that whole thing transpired is I went to, I was looking at this machine and I was like, well, I need insurance. So I called the ARA because I knew they had a great insurance program, talked to an agent. The agent said, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so who's James Waite, does all the law stuff, right? He'll get you set up with a contract. And then James was actually one who introduced me to Ami Kassar, who is in ARA. He has a company called Multifunding. And so I had a phone conversation with him and a few of from his team. And he said, hey, there's a couple routes to do this. You could look at SBA lending. You could look at some other more traditional like asset-based lending options. But he kind of knew like that was going to be the lesser of the options, that we were going to have more options with the SBA. And I guess to answer your question about, so that was kind of the reason we went down that path. The reason that we never have really taken on a lot from an investor perspective is I really haven't found like the right opportunity for that yet, right? There's been a couple of opportunities that have come along and I just haven't felt like they were the right opportunity yet. It's not to say that I'm not interested in it or I wouldn't, but I just felt like if I don't have to do it right now, I'm not going to force something, because I've seen so many partnerships and things happen where there's two different visions, or there's two different motives. One person's only concerned about this, and we're over here trying to run a business. We don't have to think about that right now, right? We can just focus on how do we build Advanced Track into the best business that we can, and not be so hyper focused on making sure that some investor gets their dividend check, and making sure that or if it was more of a partnership, that someone is that their vision is also being played out, right? So that was kind of the reason that we haven't done it yet. And honestly, I've had advice on both sides. I've had people tell me, like, do not, whatever you do, do not get an investor, right? Or do not take on a partnership. But then at the same time, it's like, well, there's good opportunities out there, and several other people have said this is a great way for you to grow your business, right? So, I think it just has to feel right, and has to be the right the right opportunity, and we just haven't had that come across the desk yet.
Yeah, it's about fit. Amit Kassar, he was our Rental Roundtable 10th guest. So if people want to deep dive on that topic, we talked about that for about an hour. And there's pros and cons to private investors and SBA loan. And it sounds like you're just mostly, just as you kind of start your business, you're opportunistic. You're sort of, feeling the market out. You're exploring opportunities. You're making decisions that make sense for you at that time. When you get this funding in October 21, are you relieved? Are you like, whew, I can sleep now? Or are you like, I got some collateral on the line. This is actually serious now. We got to accelerate. Like, do you feel like the stress was relieved, or did it go up after you sort of secured that loan?
Honestly, the only emotion that I remember very, very well after that was an extreme level of excitement. I think it was because I had wanted to do this for so long, and it was like, it's happening, right? And so I was so incredibly excited about that opportunity. That wore off after a couple of months. I mean, you're still excited, but now, to your point, you're like, okay, I need to make my first payment here. I mean, so that became a little bit more of a of a stressor. But the stress kind of shifted. To your point, I think it was, in the beginning, it was more of a, hey, we're trying to get this, we know what we want, and the stress of trying to kind of see that process through, to an extreme level of excitement, to now it's like, hey, we got the equipment, we got to get it on rent, we got to start earning some income with it so that we can pay payments, right? And make our payments. So yeah, I think it was kind of a range of emotions, but going back to like that specific day, I remember being like ecstatic. I remember exactly where I was when I got the news. I remember exactly, running over to my wife and being like, hey, we're good to go. And she was like, what? It was a really kind of a surreal moment, and something that was very exciting for us. And, it's now the excitement comes from like other things, right? As we've grown, as we've hired people and so forth, that the excitement is kind of triggered in different ways now. And I think you got to kind of embody those feelings as you go through this, and understand, like, this is a road, it's a journey. It is not, it's not going to be without its bumps or potholes or issues that come along the way. And I think one thing I've learned is, like, you just have to embrace it, embrace the challenges as they head your way. And I gave someone some advice recently that was they were trying to get a loan to build out a building, and I was telling them, I was like, you're going to hear no way more than you hear yes. And I think the best thing that you can do is to try to get comfortable hearing the no, right? It's difficult being rejected. We're all humans. We don't want to be rejected. But the more that I found was, like, I stopped caring a lot less about the no's, right? Where I would take it personally when someone would be like, no, we're not going to fund you. We're not going to fund that piece of equipment for you. And so I think, to me, getting comfortable hearing those no's was a critical point on that journey for me.
I love that. I mean, I can totally relate. I had to write on my desk, no equals next one, because it was like that first year. I mean, you probably get less no's now than you used to, but you still get no's every day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it can wear on you. And I totally resonate. Like, you had that moment in October 2021, you got the loan. Your dream is now becoming a reality. One way or another, it's going, right? The train's left the station. Have you felt like the starting Advanced Track in 4 years, it's just a constant ping pong between high mountains and low valleys? Or is it steady in the middle, or are you just sort of oscillating between like, this is the best thing in the world and this is the worst thing in the world? How do you manage those emotions?
It's definitely a roller coaster, right? It's definitely an up and down experience. It hasn't been just like some smooth, steady incline. It's definitely been, I kind of alluded to earlier, there's a lot of challenges along the way. And I think, I wanted to touch on one other thing you said about no. I had a friend who, he actually sent me a calendar invite. I was struggling when we first started the rental side. I would say, like, my least strongest attribute or component of the rental business is sales, right? I don't view myself as a salesperson. I don't, I really struggle with that side of the business, right? I'm more of an operational mind, financial. I can muster all that, but on the sales side, I struggle. And he told me, and it's kind of changed, its direct meaning. He was meaning it more towards a sales opportunity standpoint, but he actually sent me a calendar invite for every day, and he put it on my calendar and said, "Find no's today." And it was get turned down, right? Because for you, like what you wrote on your desk, no equals the next one, right? I think that's kind of exactly the direction he was pointing me to as well. But yeah, it's been this roller coaster up and down. And I think managing the emotions through those it can be a challenge. Sometimes I feel like I can get very emotional, right? And I I take things very personally that happen to us as a business. We lose an opportunity for whatever reason. Maybe we're priced slightly too high, or whatever the reason might be, that we wouldn't get the deal. But I take that personally. I'm like, well, what didn't they like about us? I won't. I feel like we're selling a brand, we're selling a service, we're selling this vision, I guess, right? And what aren't they bought into? Where do we fail, right? And so I can hyper focus on the lows in search of like that opportunity for how we get better. But we're kind of riding that train down there. You really have to manage the emotions, and I think understanding, understanding that, like, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, right? I wear my stress on my sleeve. If I'm stressed, like, it affects those around me. And so I've really had to be conscious about, I'm going to taper this back a little bit, and I'm not going to react. I might need to take a few minutes to like literally take some deep breaths before I go in and, explode. And so I've really had to kind of be intentional about how I manage those emotions. Yeah.
I totally resonate. I mean, for me, the hardest part of starting a company 4 years ago has been the emotional side, because you're going to be told no 90% of the time, 99% of the time. And, I've also had to learn that, like, I am not the business. I'm a unique person that's not defined by what's ever happening in the workplace. And it's harder when you're the founder, when it's like your baby and you designed the logo and came up with the name and you hired the first employee and you got the first customer and you did everything. It's hard to manage that. And you mentioned taking it personally. I was thinking about that Michael Jordan meme, like, from The Last Dance, and he was like, someone said something, and he's like, I took that personally. He took everything personally, and I think there's an element of like that makes you better because you care, but just that balance. And I've talked to other founders too, and it's hard. And I think that's why I think peer groups are important. We've had Dan Crowley on. I've joined a peer group actually myself. I've been telling everyone to join a peer group, and I was like, I was in one myself. And you start to be around other owners and business leaders, and you realize the emotions and the things you go through are consistent. Everyone we talk to is dealing with the same insecurities, the same sort of things. But I do think what's interesting is you talk to people who are 10 years, Charlie Peterson. Yeah, there you go. He's listening in from Peer Executive Group. You're welcome for the shout out, Charlie. But you talk to people who are 10, 15, 20 years in, and they're like, starting the business, it was great. We just knew it the whole time. And it's like, if you've got kids, Bryan, you probably don't remember as much the diapers and the sleepless nights. And that's what it's like starting a business. And that's why I like talking to you right now, because you're sort of coming through the other side of those dark nights in a sense. But you still remember it, because, the longer you get removed from it, everyone's like, it was up and to the right. We had a little bit. No, it's like, it was really hard. And there were probably times you didn't think you were going to make it. You didn't know if you're doing the right thing. And I think the hardest part is the emotional side, right? And that's why peer groups or mentors and friends, community, you can't do it alone. Although you're the president, you're the guy at the top, it really takes a village. I know your wife has been a part of this as well.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that, having, not necessarily an echo chamber, but people that can truly hold you accountable to and be like, hey, you're taking that way too seriously. You're going down a rabbit hole there, or whatever it is, and they can kind of help steer you, right? I think having those people in your life is very important. And I'm blessed to have several folks like that in my life. But yeah, it's definitely something that it's hard to regulate as like you're going through it, right? It's easier to look back and be like, yeah. But I think that's kind of been like I said earlier, it's just something I have to be intentional with.
Yeah. And like Steve Jobs talked about, the dots in life are random, but you look back as a straight line, right? You don't always see it in hindsight. Yeah. Like, COVID was a terrible thing, but also our businesses wouldn't be where they are today without that, that genesis, right? So it's interesting. These dots tend to connect in hindsight, but in the moment, it doesn't feel like it. I want to get back to the story. So we're October 2021, you got the loan. What's going on next? Are you starting to buy equipment?
Yeah.
By the way, for the people listening, you've been full time at another job this entire time and continue to be today, which is impressive how you're burning the
Well,
candle multiple ends
yeah,
right now.
actually, I didn't start full time until 22. So
Okay.
in 20, I had an opportunity to do some consulting for a company up in Dallas who I had met through actually another peer group. And so, he and I was doing some consulting for them, and there was some discussion about coming to work full time, and it just didn't really work out. And then in 2022, it really, which oddly enough, after we got the loan, after some of these things had happened, and we kind of had the rental business growing, where I saw the need though was like, I felt like there was this point in time which we had bought some equipment, we had it on rent, we had a lot of pops happening, but I saw the fact like I didn't truly feel like as long as I was taking a salary out of the business that I was going to be able to as aggressively grow the business. And so I saw this opportunity with Moss Utilities to come on board and number one, be able to kind of provide more of a launch pad, if you will, for Advanced Track. And that was, for us to be able to take, to not have to rely solely on Advanced Track for our income. I think it's the biggest component of that. But over the course of the summer of 22, so we had equipment for maybe 6 months at this point, 9 months at this point. Had a multitude of rentals, and things were headed in the right direction. And then we kind of got to the point where we decided that we wanted to steer the ship in a slightly different way. When we first bought equipment, I knew that I wanted to be in the earth moving space, but we were going to kind of focus on smaller gear. We were going to focus on skid steers and mini excavators. And where we lived outside of Austin, there was a lot of opportunity to rent to people who had ranches and rent to people who, were going to go out and, build a house or whatever else. Right. So it was a little bit more, I wouldn't quite say DIY, but a little bit of more of a mix, if you will, between contractors and that DIY community. And so we had some smaller gear, and in summer of 22, I saw an opportunity to really go after the bigger gear. And that's what my background was in. That's what, my family's business did. And so as that opportunity presented itself, I was like, this is what I want to do. And the nice thing about the bigger gear is that it typically is not as frequently turned, right? Like you're not renting a skid steer for a 2-day rental and it comes back in and you got to clean it and grease it and get it ready to go. I mean, these things go out and they're out for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, sometimes longer than that. And so we had some opportunity. We were actually re-renting equipment to other rental companies that just had more opportunity. That's where I would say over the course of the time that I've worked at Moss Utilities alongside Advanced Track, I would say that's the point in time where, again, like being intentional with what our purpose was, right? We knew where we wanted to go long term, but we also knew that came at a cost, right? Because us renting to a rental company are obviously taking a discount on the rate. And number two, like you're not as actively building up your business if you are just only renting to rental companies. But it was a great way for us to facilitate that year. And then we kind of kept building the fleet up. We'd get an opportunity. It was a long-term deal. We'd go buy that piece of equipment. And then 23 rolled around and we set some pretty aggressive goals for 23. We knew that we wanted to hire our first employee outside of my wife and I. And we made that a goal. And that was something that we accomplished in October of last year. And honestly, when that happened, that was like I guess that's like really what completed the reason that I struggling with the sleepless nights and the, going to do the Moss Utilities during the day and Advanced Track at night. Like that's what made it worth it. Because the second that Tyler came on board, it's been like to the moon, right? We've significantly increased our rental opportunities, our sales opportunities, and it shows this year. And now this year we've hired another employee. The fleet's has grown even more. And now we're starting to re-rent to satisfy our customers' demands. So it's kind of coming full circle now.
Reminds me of that Spider-Man meme. Everyone's you're like, now you're the re-rental, you're the big company, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I like
quite like that, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you started to, and you're sort of grown consistently, like you didn't get over your skis. Companies can drown, they can starve, right? But you didn't drown. You didn't take on too much. You grew consistently. When you hired Tyler, was he focused on sales, operations, a little bit of a mix of both? Why was that hire so successful?
Yeah, so I met Tyler in 2019 and just off the bat knew like this guy gets it. He gets what my personal vision was and the business that we both worked for at the time. And I just really felt like he was one of the best salespeople that I had worked around in my experience. So I was like, I want to hire him at some point. I don't know how it's going to work out. And we played through the scenario several different times before we finally made it a reality. But yeah, I think he's been mostly focused on the sales side of the business. Now we've since hired a service technician. And so he's kind of helping him too and lining his day out. So now he's probably, I'd say maybe 20% operations and 80% on the sales side of the business. That may change from day to day, just depending on kind of what we have going on. But yeah, I think what's made that so successful is just he was bought in before he ever worked at Advanced Track. And I think it's rare to find those types of people that you really identify with. They identify with what you're doing, with what you're building. I mean, he flat out told me when he was at his previous job, he's like, I'm not making a move until I can come here. Right. And so it's just it's been really special. I think and as a team, the service technician kind of has the same exact standpoint. Right. So the team is really bought into Advanced Track as a business. We all kind of take an extreme level of ownership in what we do every day. And to me, that's why I think it's been so successful.
Yeah. I mean, you hired people, the roles you hired, people you hired, it's about the culture and the fit. You got the right person and then you put them in the company. You also didn't overhire, right? You hired one really awesome person. That's better than 3 mediocre. And, there's some Facebook posts recently around people. When do you hire your first salesperson? Like, in hindsight, do you feel like you could have done that earlier, or did you feel like you did it at the right time? Because it seemed like it did unlock a lot of things for you in terms of sleep, right? But also like growing faster. And like, you mentioned earlier, sales is not your favorite thing. So you also supplemented what you're not strongest in, right? And you brought that into the company. I'm just very interested in the sales hire because that can go wrong very quickly. Like you mentioned, there's the right person, the right fit. Like, what were some of the activities he was doing? Like how was he finding these leads? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So he kind of came with the book of business, honestly. He had several, relationships that were from his previous positions, and he had been around the rental industry for, a number of years prior to coming here. So it wasn't like he was kind of starting from scratch, but he's definitely, I think where he is starting from scratch and where it's been a challenge is going and knocking on a door, wearing a new shirt or a new vest or whatever. And that's one thing, right? And if you're switching from United Rentals to Sunbelt or Sunbelt to United Rentals, like those are household names, right? Those are names that are regularly mentioned around a contractor's job site trailer, right? Advanced Track was not that. That was not that, right? We didn't have that. And so I think where he really positioned him, and I think this is why it has worked so well, is because, like I said, he is bought into the vision. He says all the time that he's just out spreading the gospel, right? And that's kind of what it is, right? He's out there really trying to sell people on what Advanced Track is today and what we want to become down the road. And there's people who are like, I don't care about that. I want the lowest price and that's it. And there's other people that, that we've been introduced to and that are like, man, we love what you guys are doing. We like that we have another option outside of the dealership to buy, sell, service, and rent equipment from. Like, let's figure out how we can help you grow. If that's giving you more business, if that's whatever it might be, right? So I think that's been his biggest challenge to overcome. It's not necessarily the people that he had to call on. It was really getting in front of those people and them being open-minded to a new company, right? But why I made that hire, I think there were 2 reasons. Number one, I had always anticipated my first hire being a service technician. I think in my mind, I was thinking the fleet's going to get big enough. We're going to have a mechanic, and that's just going to be the logical next step. But I think we talked about this earlier, but we started using Heave in 2022 or 2023 actually. And what I discovered with Heave was we had a lot of flexibility to service our equipment regardless of where it was in Texas, because they have a presence in San Antonio, a presence in Austin, a presence in Houston, a presence in Dallas. It gave us a ton of flexibility. And we started seeing our response times. Like we'd get a service call and we'd have someone there within 24 hours, in some cases before the end of the day, or sometimes that same morning. And our customers were like, dude, this is amazing service. Like we literally call, the machine's down and it's back up and running within 4, 5, 6 hours, right? And so that was kind of a game changer. And I felt a lot less pressure to hire that technician. And at that point started kind of really greasing the wheels of, okay, how can I grow the business now that I don't have to focus so much on the technician? And I knew that hiring a salesperson would be critical. I guess I just didn't realize like quite the impact that that person would have on our business. Over the course of the last year, our sales numbers and rentals numbers have all increased significantly. So yeah, I think it was a little bit of, and I would say like I said earlier that I vividly remember how I felt the day that the SBA called and said we're good to go, or the bank called and said we're good to go with the SBA loan. I can also vividly remember the feeling that I had before I hired Tyler, and it was nerves, right? I was very excited, but I was also very nervous. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that he was the right guy, and it was the best decision for our business to hire him. I've had other opportunities to bring people on since, and there's one in particular that I'm thinking of where it was like, this makes sense, let's do it. But my heart of hearts was telling me, don't do it, right? And it was a completely different feeling. And I'm glad that we haven't done that, because I don't know that we're ready for that yet, right? So I think you kind of got to trust your gut. And my gut in that situation was telling me, do it. And my wife was like, can we afford this? I said, we can't afford not to do it. So we just got to figure it out.
Sure. Yeah, I've been reading this book called Deep Change, and the idea is like people are scared to change to the right solution, even though it's hard. And the question is like, can you afford not to do it? You know what I mean? And I think that's a great way to view it. And just recap on Heave, people listening, Alex Kraft came on, I think episode 17 or so, but they on-demand service through an app. And what I also like is you continue to ease your way into things, right? You did like the essentially part-time service through the Heave app, which allowed you to deliver amazing customer service. And now that the sales has taken off, now you've then hired the full-time person, right? You didn't do things in the opposite order. You didn't overhire. You sort of tested the market, and then you made the right hires over time. And I was going to ask about inflection points. I felt like the SBA loan, hiring Tyler, like what would be a third inflection point in your journey? It seems like those two were pretty big, like aha moments, like we're kind of taking the next step as a company.
Yeah, I think we just recently, we had a yard in Dripping Springs that was very small, and it was very basic. It was not anything, it wasn't anything fancy. And, once I moved to Dallas to take this job with Moss, and Tyler's down in San Antonio. So we've kind of operated out of like two very remote places, or remote yards, if you will. And it's been kind of handshake agreements with the owners of those properties. But now we've really felt like we're kind of getting squeezed, and not in a bad way, just, stuff would hit our yard and we don't have enough place, don't have a great place to turn it, don't have a place to work on the equipment very well. And so we kind of got to this point where we knew we needed to do something and find our own property and kind of plant a flag. And to me, that was done last month. We signed a lease agreement, got 3 acres down in San Marcos, which is kind of perfectly positioned between San Antonio and Austin. It gives us a lot of flexibility for that market. And I kind of truly see this as another inflection point. It was another thing that was like, this was a very difficult decision. It's a very expensive decision. It has a lot of implications. But what we kind of realized in that moment was, this is something that we need if we're going to continue on this path forward. And, we have like a little company group text thread, and I texted the picture after it was all said and done. And our tech wrote back and he was like, man, I'm so excited, because I know like what this means for our business. I know what this means for my job here, and the stability and so forth. So, I feel like that is kind of the next step in making us more, more and more legitimate as we kind of navigate through each year.
Mm-hmm. You get the SBA loan, you get your first awesome hire. Now you get your official building, which I saw on LinkedIn. It looks awesome, by the way, from the picture I saw. What are your goals for the future? You kind of go, 1 year out, 3 years out, 5 years out. There will be more inflection points. What is your bigger vision of what you want to build here?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously want to have a larger fleet, although I'm not hyper focused on having, a certain number of rental assets in my fleet, right? Like I'm not over here going 100's the magic number or 300's the magic number. I really am less concerned about the magic number. I'm more concerned about the value that we can bring to our customers. And if that means we have a smaller customer base, but our profit margins are really good and we're bringing great value and they see great value in us, to me, that's what is going to matter. And if we can do that with 2, 3, 4 people, great. And if it turns into something that has, 300 machines and a staff of 20, 30, 40 people, whatever it looks like, then I'm okay with that too, right? But I think the biggest, when it comes to what our goals are, we have really worked hard over the last 4 years to define ourselves as an independent dealership. And we want to offer more than just rentals or just sales. That's why we hired the technicians so that we can work on our customers' machines. We've also partnered with a company called Activate to do some side-by-side fleet management with some of our good customers. We really feel like this is kind of the path of our business forward. It may sound like a lot to some folks, but it's in my mind, a very holistic approach to how a contractor should be managing their fleet, right? Because not every time should they rent. Sometimes the needs are long-term and they should purchase, right? Or maybe they have too many assets right now and they need to, dispose of some. Like, we can help with that, right? Or a machine's broke down. So I feel like that management component really comes to life next year. That's what one of our goals is for next year. And in 3 years, my hope is that this kind of foundation that we've set for Advanced Track is really starting to gain more steam and taking off. What that number looks like as far as growth, I don't quite have that pegged. But I do definitely kind of see that as being the trajectory that we spent, 23 and 24 really dialing in our rental processes and how we're growing that side of the business. Our technicians really come into his own here recently. We've got him working on a lot of our stuff, a lot of our customer stuff. That's been a huge deal. And I think like this next gradual step for next year is to focus on the management side and offer that to our customers as another service. So that's kind of my hope, my roadmap here over the next 1-3 years.
And at some point, you have the big three: United, Sunbelt, and Advanced Track, right? And that's what people think about in Texas.
That's the goal.
I'm thinking about like what makes Advanced Track different, because we talked to a lot of rental companies and you ask them what makes them different. Customer service, and it's like, about how, like, what about your particular rental company? Do you have better people, and how do you have better people? Like, you start drilling down, and it's hard actually to really nail a strategy and a vision that makes you unique, right? And having a unique perspective in the market sometimes means you're going to alienate some group of the market who say, I don't get it, I don't like it. But for a certain segment of the market, you're going to be the number one choice. And because of that, you can charge a premium price. What do you feel like the unique offering is to your customers that makes you different than any other dealership or rental company that's in Texas? Like, what is it about Advanced Track that makes you guys special?
I think there's a couple things, but I think the first thing that kind of leads to these other options is we have a very difficult time saying no, right? When an opportunity is presented to us and it's for a customer who's done business with us in the past, we're like, okay, well, how do we solve this problem, right? Our customer has a problem. How do we solve it? Does it mean we point them, what direction do we point them, right? And kind of back to why we're building out this management component is we've had several of our customers who are like, we don't, we know what we need, but we're not exactly sure what we need. We know that we need to kind of be going this general direction with our fleet. And so I think that's something that really that attitude has given us a lot of opportunities. And so I think those opportunities allow us to bring value to our customers, right? Whether that's through a consignment opportunity or a rental opportunity or service, and now hopefully fleet management as well. I think that's really what kind of identifies us differently than other companies. And it's a lot harder, I think, when you have a company that's been around for 20 years, right? And everyone's sitting back going, hey, this has worked. I don't need to get into sales. I don't want to get into sales, right? And I don't need to get into fleet management. I just know that when my phone rings and someone needs a piece of equipment, or I go onto a job site and see that someone needs to rent a piece of equipment, that's how I'm going to generate the opportunity for the business. And we've kind of felt differently. We've kind of felt like, let's be the problem solver for our customers. And saying no is probably the biggest way to get you kicked out, right? Because if the second that you say no is they're going to call someone else. And so we always try to find a solution to every problem that our customer has, even if that's like, hey, go to United Rentals and rent that piece of equipment, because that's a better deal in this situation, right? We really try to keep their best interests at heart.
So when customers call you with a problem, you want to be the first call and have a solution. And that could be with you, it could be with someone else. And the biggest thing is you're answering on the first ring, you're solving people's problems, and you build that trust over time. You don't want to say no, because over time, people are going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I want to wrap up here, Bryan. It's been really cool to see your journey from SBA loan, the first hire. Now you got a physical property site, looks great. And I have no doubt you will hit your milestones along the way, continue to be successful. I guess the final question is what makes you the most proud about what you've achieved so far in Advanced Track? When you think about, wow, it's been 4 years, probably many ways further ahead than maybe you could have even imagined. Like, what makes you the most proud of what you built so far?
I think what makes me the most proud is the people that we've been able to hire. Honestly, like I know that's probably cliche from an owner's perspective, but it really, really has been impactful to me as a person, as just a human being, but also as the business owner to know that the goals that we've had and that we've set out to accomplish, they're coming to fruition, right? And our goals are not like, hey, I want to make $2 million this year, or I want to do $5 million in revenue, whatever. Our goals are, we want to pour into the people around us, right? And we believe that this is a vessel that's been provided for us to do that. And we've seen kind of the fruits of our labor this year in that respect. And so to me, that's the thing that makes me the most proud. I don't, the stress of the everyday, the revenue and all that, like, and it's cool. Like we've done, big numbers this year compared to our previous years. And so it's easy to kind of get riled up with that. But, that text from someone that says like, man, you're doing more for me than anyone has ever done in the past. Like, that's the most proud.
Is that text from a customer or employee?
Employee.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I'm proud of your business. I'm proud to know you, Bryan. It's been cool to see the journey. I have no doubt you'll continue to be successful, and you're a very grounded person. I love the focus you have and the intentionality about every decision you make. So it's been cool to follow your story, Bryan. And thanks for coming on today. You've been an awesome guest, and best of luck in 2025 and getting the new property going, and got a lot to do next year.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone.